everybody, I'm Julie DeMauro and welcome to What's Cooking Revere. Today I'm actually going to be making a family favorite dessert that we make quite often in my family, especially in the summertime. It's called the Mile High Strawberry Pie. It's taken on various names in my family by my nieces and nephews and even my own children. Sometimes it's referred to as the pink stuff or the fluff stuff, but either way, whatever you would like to call it, it is a great summertime dessert. It's sweet and it's light and it's very easy to make. Just to give you a little background of how I came about this recipe, my mother, who is an excellent cook and baker, was a big fan of the Gus Saunders cooking show that used to be a radio show that she would listen to a couple weekdays in the afternoon. And Gus Saunders, as many people may know, was the executive chef at Maison Revere for many years. And then he went on to develop his own cookbooks and then become a local radio personality within the Boston area. So this cookbook, or this recipe, is actually from a cookbook that was produced by Jordan Marsh. And if you ever come across these cookbooks within like yard sales or just going through somebody's house and they say, I want to get rid of these cookbooks, make sure you grab anything that has a Jordan Marsh cookbook label or a Gus Saunders cookbook label, because some of the recipes in there are truly gems and you won't find them anyplace else. So we're going to get started with the pie crust for this pie. What I did last night is I actually made it's like a cookie crumble crust, and it's really simple to make, but it calls for a half a cup of butter, or 1 stick of butter, a half a cup of brown sugar, a cup of flour, and a half a cup of chopped walnuts. Now, if you have somebody in your family who has a nut allergy or they don't like walnuts, you can eliminate the walnuts. We do have a couple of people that have nut allergies in my family, and I have eliminated this portion of the part of the recipe, and it comes out just as fine. So we're going to start off by creaming the butter. So we're going to add 1 stick of butter, and you want to make sure the butter is softened. We're going to put it into the mixer, and we are going to, here we go. We're going to just cream this butter. Just a couple of minutes, 30 seconds, a minute, not too long. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add our brown sugar, a half a cup of that. And we're going to cream that together. Make sure it comes together really nice, it's well blended. It's very important to have the butter and sugar be well blended. In any recipe that you do, not just in this recipe. And sometimes what you have to do is you have to just lower the mixing bowl and just scrape out the sides to make sure that it is well blended. And that is okay. That's something that a lot of good bakers do. They will recommend that you do that. I'm going to put that there, and we're just going to give it another spin. I'm not convinced it's really ready to go. And there we go. You can see it coming together here in the mixing bowl a little bit better. And there. Okay, so then we're going to add our flour a little bit at a time. We're going to gradually add it in. Add a little bit more. And I think it's safe to add the rest of the flour. It won't fly out, which can cause a big mess in the kitchen if you're not careful. The flour flying everywhere. And I'm just going to turn the mixer on just a little bit higher. We're going to see how this comes together. Now, the original recipe does not call for any salt or vanilla in the cookie crust. Pie crust, but I find that just adding a dash of salt and just a little bit of vanilla just gives it a little bit something extra. It really adds to the crunchiness of it and also the sweetness of it. I'm afraid for most vanilla that I add to recipes, I don't really measure, so you can just put in as much as you like, anywhere from a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. We're going to mix this all together again. Here we go. Okay. And I'm just going to make sure that this is actually coming together as it should in the bowl. And it looks nice and crispy and crumbly. And we are going to add in the chopped walnuts. And again, if you have somebody in your family that has a nut allergy or doesn't like walnuts, or you're going someplace and the people there have a nut allergy, feel free to eliminate the nuts. It will have a different taste, but it'll be just as delicious either way, with the nuts or without the nuts. So whichever way you would like to. And you want to take the nuts, you want to chop them up nice and fine. It's okay to have some big pieces in there, but you want to make sure that they're chopped up, just to make it a little bit easier for you. Buy the walnuts that are already chopped, because that'll make things easier for you when you go to actually put this together. Save some time in the kitchen. And we're going to bring this bowl back up. And here we go. And I'm just going to put it on low speed. We're going to combine it all together. And it's really coming together nicely right now. Okay, so now that it's come together in the mixing bowl, I'm actually going to transfer it to this baking sheet, and we're going to bake this for about 10 minutes at 350. And at about the total baking time for this is 15 minutes total, or 12 minutes depending on how high your temperature in your oven runs. But what we do is we usually at 10 minutes we take it out for a second and we break it apart, and then we put it back in. And what you're going to find is actually, when you take it out at 10 minutes, you're going to think, wow, this really isn't coming together. It doesn't look as if it is cooking, but that is not the case. This cookie crust pie shell is supposed to be moist when you take it out, and that is okay. And I am just going to, and here we go. I'm going to just put this here for right now. If I was in my own kitchen, I would throw it over my shoulder and it would go right in the sink. But that is not the case, and that is okay. So I'm going to spoon this out, and I'm going to put it on our pie sheet. And then we're going to put it in the oven, and we're actually going to take a short break because I will need to wash out this mixing bowl and the whisk to make the pie filling for this dessert. So we're actually going to take a quick short break, and we're going to wash these things out. But before we do that, we're going to get all of the mixture onto the cookie sheet. We're going to pat it down because we don't want it to be too high. We want it to kind of come together nicely. And really cook up nicely. And when it is done, it is going to look a lot like what I have done last night, this golden brown, crunchy, sweet mixture of pie crust. And I am going to, I'm just going to use this to kind of bat it down a little bit. It's okay if it breaks apart, that's fine as well. And as you can see, this is a really simple recipe. It doesn't call for anything, ingredients that you really have to shop around for. The staples in your kitchen, just the basic, butter and flour, brown sugar, walnuts if you're a house that can have walnuts all the time, vanilla. And it's, quick and easy, very, very easy to do. You can make up the crust ahead of time like I did last night. And the one thing I want to say about the crust, what I did here is this recipe I told you about just now about making this crust up is actually makes about, I would say, about a cup to a cup and a quarter of the cake crust. What we do is we double it because when we serve this dessert, everybody loves the crust at the top of the pie as well as the bottom. So we want to make sure we have enough of both so that it covers well. So I'm going to transfer this to the oven, and then we're going to take a short break. Welcome back, everybody. Believe it or not, it's almost been about 10 minutes. So we're going to check on our pie crust, the cookie crumb pie crust that we put in the oven at the end of the first segment. So I'm going to take a look at that. We're coming up on 10 minutes. As you can see, I'm going to pull it out of the oven. It's starting to come together. It's starting to get a little brown, what have you. So we're going to take a fork and we're going to just kind of make sure that we break it up a little bit, and then it just separates a little bit more. As I said in the previous segment, we talked about it being somewhat moist, and that's because of just the way it comes together within the batter. So you want to break that up a little bit and really separate it out, and that allows it to dry out and to give it that nice crunchy taste and feel and look. And so we're gonna just take a fork, you're just going to kind of break it apart, you know, nothing drastic. And as you can see, it's still pretty wet, still pretty moist. We're going to just continue to break this apart, spread it out on the cookie sheet, and then we're going to put it back in the oven for another maybe, I'll say another 5 minutes or so. So now we're going to talk about the pie shell, the actual filling for the pie. So what it calls for 10 ounces of defrosted strawberries with the sugar. It calls for 2 egg whites, and I'm gonna separate them, obviously. It calls for 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I always use fresh lemon juice, but you could use the lemon juice that comes in the artificial lemon juice. It's still the same measurement. We're going to use 2/3 cups of sugar. You have all the sugar in the fruit, so we're going to use 2/3 cups of regular sugar to go in with that as well. 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and then a tablespoon of vanilla. Feel free to add a little bit more if you'd like to. And then lastly, I'm going to use the generic term for this, but we're going to add 1 tub, and that's about 8 ounces of frozen non-dairy whip. And so, but I think you can see from the tub exactly what it is we're going to be putting in there. So first we're going to take the strawberries and we're going to put them in the mixing bowl. And we are going to just bring this up here and we're going to give it a whirl. Just get it going a little bit. Break it apart. And that's good. And now we're going to add the sugar. Remember, it's 2/3 cups of sugar. There's a lot of sugar in the strawberries, so you don't want to do any more than that because then it would be too sweet. I'm going to bring that together. Combine that. And we're going to shut that off for right now. And what I'm going to do, we have about 2 minutes left to check on the pie crust. So I'm actually going to separate the eggs. And we're going to separate the yolks from the white. And it's actually a lot easier than it looks. Do not be afraid to try this out. You just want to really just go back and forth, separating, keeping the yolk in the shell, and very gently go back and forth, taking the white away from the yolk. I'm going to do one more. We're going to get this together, and then we will check on that pie crust. I always try to go with the bigger side of the shell to get the yolk, to put the yolk back in when you separate it. But don't be afraid to try this out. It's actually a lot simpler than I think people are willing to try. So let's go back over to the oven and pull out the pie crust, and we're just about at the 15 minutes. So we're going to pull this out. And I'm going to put this over here for now. And I'm going to shut this off. Okay. Okay, and that has been turned off. So that looks good. What I might do in a couple of minutes, if I still don't think it's crispy enough, I might just throw it back in the oven with the oven off and just let it sit there and kind of just get a little bit more crunchy. And that's a great way to just finalize it if you just don't think it's done to your liking. You don't want to leave it in too much. As you can see at the very end, it's starting to get a little burnt, and you don't want that because this is one of those recipes where if you burn it, you can taste it. Even just a little bit of burnness could really ruin the recipe, and you would have to start all over again. And you don't want to do that, especially if you're in a rush. So, and I am actually going to throw this back in. I do not like the way it looks. As any baker will know, a lot of times when you start cooking something, you know, it's not coming together the way you want, or you don't like the way it looks. It's always good to add a little bit more or put it back in the oven. Like I said, a great trick to getting something to cook up or get crunchy is to put it back in the oven when the oven is off. You can leave it in there for maybe like 5 minutes or so. So we're going to leave that in there for now. So getting back to our pie filling, we're going to add the egg whites. And we are going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of the salt, which I have here. And we are going to mix this till this, oh no, I'm sorry, I forgot one ingredient. We're also going to add the lemon juice. So what I've done is I've gotten a fresh lemon, I cut it in half, and this is a lemon squeezer. This is probably one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. I use this a lot. I use this to create marinades. I use this for baking. But what it does, it just squeezes out the lemon juice. It really extracts the juice very well. As you can see, it's spurting up a little bit. But also it takes away from seeds getting into your recipe, which can be, you know, not fun because you have to dig them out afterwards. So we're going to make sure that we have the 2 tablespoons of lemon. If not, we have a little bit more lemon so we do. We have 2 tablespoons of lemon to put in. So usually just maybe like 1/3 of the lemon you could use to cut up and use a lemon press to get the juice out. Okay, so now we're going to come back to our mixer, and we are going to start to mix this. And we're going to actually do it on low speed. We want to make sure everything blends well together. But we are going to mix this until it actually comes together and it forms stiff peaks. And so it almost looks like a meringue, but not quite, but it comes out like that. It'll take a few minutes. Some people, when they do desserts like this, they actually put the mixing bowl in the freezer. You can do that. I do that a lot of times when I mix up desserts that call for homemade whipped cream or heavy cream recipes, stuff like that. I also make an ice cream cake where I usually put the mixing bowl in the freezer prior to actually putting any ingredients in it. I'm not sure if it really makes a difference, but I think there's plenty of chefs that do it, so it's probably some validity to it. So we're going to bring this together. I'm going to put the speed on the mixer a little bit higher. Actually, it's on high, so we're just going to let this mix up. And how this comes together and how quickly it comes together and how long it takes for it to form soft of the hard peak really depends on what's going on in your kitchen. So if it's really hot in your kitchen, it's going to take a little bit longer. That's probably a good time to put the mixing bowl in the freezer, let it chill. It makes it come together a little quicker. And as you can see, it's starting to lighten up. You see more of a lighter color, a pink color come through. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes, and then it should be to where I want it. I'm going to let that cook. Let that stir. And it's coming together very nicely. It's starting to stiffen up, starting to get a little bit more fuller in the bowl. And that's what we like to see. I hate to give people times of how long they should mix something or how long they should bake something. I mean, as you can see with the pie crust shell, I had it in there for about 15 minutes. It wasn't where I wanted it to be, so I put it back in. So it's, it's all give and take, and as you make a recipe more and more, at the end result, maybe next time I'll, leave it in a little bit longer, I'll take it out sooner. So it's always that give and take, plus or minus. So don't be afraid to experiment with how long you mix something, how long you cook something. It's okay to vary from the recipe a little bit if you'd like. Okay. And as you can see, now it's becoming a lighter pink color. It's starting to get stiff in the bowl. We're going to really, this is beautiful. This is really coming out quite nice. I'm going to let it mix for 30 more seconds or so. Okay, and I'm going to shut this off. So as you can see, it is a nice, I'm actually going to take my spatula and I'm just going to show you. See how it's like a soft, it looks soft, but it's actually a stiff peak. And this is how you want it to look. You want it to look nice. You want it to be stiff. It should be this type of color. And what I am going to do is I'm going to take our container of non-dairy frozen dip, non-dairy frozen, it's not really cream because it's not dairy, but we're going to put just a little bit in, and we're going to fold it in. If you were doing this by hand, you would have to cut and fold it in, but where we have the mixer, we're going to put it on low speed. We're going to add a little bit at a time. There we go. And it's best not to put the whole container in at once because sometimes it's hard for it to break apart in the first part of the mixture, the egg whites and the sugar. So you want to make sure that it's well blended. But if you put this whole container of Cool Whip in, sometimes you can dig into it and use like a big chunk of Cool Whip. It's not well blended. And we're going to go back and we're going to put a little bit more in. And you're going to do this until the container is empty. It's still keeping its consistency, still nice and stiff, beautiful color. And we're going to put the last batch of this in, and we're also going to add some vanilla. Now, the original recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of vanilla. I think this is sufficient. If you are not a vanilla fan, if you'd like to have less vanilla in there, you can. If you want to have a little bit more, you can. It all depends, but vanilla is one of my favorite ingredients in the kitchen. And I try to use always real vanilla. I try not to use the imitation vanilla, but sometimes I do use the imitation vanilla. But if I can use the real vanilla extract, I do. I think it has a better taste. That's my opinion. This is actually an extract that I have, and we're going to do this. There we go. We had a little bit of a spillage. That's okay. And now we're really going to bring it together. And I'm just going to shut this mixer off for 1 minute, and I'm just going to get the side scraped a little bit. Make sure everything is coming together and will blend in nicely. There we go. And while that's going through this final mixing, I'm actually going to take out the pie crust. And it is darkening up a little bit more now. I definitely think this looks a little bit better. It's a little bit browner in color. Once it cools off, it will definitely get crunchier and be browner in color as it is in the pan here in the mixture I made last night. Okay, So we are going to, I'm going to lower the mixing bowl. And we are going to move away all of our ingredients we don't need anymore. And we're going to put this to the side. And we're going to bring our container that I bought. Now, the original recipe for this actually calls for to be put in a pie dish, an 8 or a 10-inch pie dish, a round pie dish. When I put this pie mixture into this, you're going to say you could probably make 2 pies if you were to do what it originally called for, an 8 or a 10-inch round pie dish. So we usually use a Corningware white baking dish because it freezes well, it doesn't crack, and we find that it definitely holds the mixture well. So I'm just going to plop it in, and you're not going to fool around with it too much. You're just going to plop it in, and you are just going to make sure you evenly put it in the dish. Sometimes you do have to take the spatula and just layer it on. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to get the rest off this whisk, and we are going to continue to layer it into this pan. So the end result of this is once we put it all together, we will put this in the freezer. This does need to be frozen, but it usually takes anywhere from 3 to 5 hours to freeze. If you leave it in longer, that is okay. This travels well for about 15 minutes. If you're just going to, somebody's house down the street, this is a great dish to take. Just make sure that you put it right in their freezer when you get there. So when it's time for dessert, it's still frozen and consistent and not melting all over the place. And I'm just going to remove this so we can get at the rest of the contents at the bottom of the bowl. And as you can see, if you look at the whisk, you see how it's just hanging on, it's stiff, it's hanging on to the whisk, it's not dropping off. That's how you know that it's the right consistency. I'm going to put that right there for now. And we're going to continue to layer this in. And you can see why the children in our family call it the pink stuff or pink fluff, because it does look like pink fluff. And get the last of it out of the bowl. And one more go around, one more sweep, and then we will make sure that it is even all the way around in the tray or dish that we are going to leave it in. So sometimes you do have to just kind of give it a little, evening out. And I'm going to take this and I'm just going to scrape the rest off here. And if the first time you make this, it doesn't come out the way you want, don't worry about that. Try it again. This is such a great recipe. I am going to take the rest of the pie crust crumb and I'm going to sprinkle it on here for now. This is the batch that I made from last night. But as you can see, it really doesn't, one batch of this really doesn't cover it. If you have people in the family that love the crunchy part of it on the top and on the bottom, like I said, you want to make sure these are well cooked and well cooled off before you add onto this mixture. So I'm going to put this out front for now. This is what the Mile High strawberry pie will look like when it's complete. And as you can see, we have just the dish itself with the original recipe and its measurements, and then we have the extra crunchy stuff off to the side. You can add those on later. You can put them in a container and have it as a side dish when you're serving this. or you could actually use it. You could use the crunchy stuff if you were doing like an ice cream bar at home. That could be one of your toppings. But I hope you try this recipe out. It's a great, easy recipe for the summertime, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Have a great day.